The dinner table was set like always. Plates neatly arranged, bowls of steaming food in the center, glasses filled with water. To an outsider, it might have looked like a perfect family meal, but for me it felt like walking into a courtroom where I was always the guilty one. The silence was heavy, pressing down on my chest. No laughter, no chatter, just the dull clinking of spoons against plates like a metronome marking time in a house where love had long grown cold. I tried to eat. The food, though perfectly cooked, tasted bland on my tongue. I chewed mechanically, more out of habit than hunger. Every bite felt like forcing myself to swallow unspoken words I'd been holding back for years. Across from me sat Anna, my sister. She looked flawless, as always. Her posture straight, her hair perfectly tucked behind her ear, her every movement elegant, almost rehearsed. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence alone was enough to remind me of the endless comparisons that had haunted me my whole life. Beside her, my father sat tall, his jaw set, eyes sharp and watchful. His silence was not peace, it was the silence of judgment, the kind that made your skin crawl because you knew the storm could break at any second. My mother sat at the end of the table, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her gaze drifting anywhere but toward me. It was as if she wanted to disappear into the wallpaper, pretending the cracks in this family didn't exist. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair. The air was thick, suffocating, as though words unsaid were piling up around us, turning invisible yet unbearable. My throat felt dry, but I didn't dare reach for the water. The slightest movement, the smallest sound, felt like it could shatter the fragile balance of this silence. And then, the smallest sound broke through. My fork scraped against the plate louder than I intended. The noise echoed through the stillness like a hammer striking steel. My heart lurched, my breath caught. My father's eyes flicked to me. Just for a second. But in that second I saw it all. Disappointment, anger, disapproval. The same look he had given me 100 times before, each one carving deeper into my soul. Anna lowered her gaze, not meeting mine. She didn't smile, didn't frown, didn't offer even the smallest flicker of comfort. She just continued to eat, silent, perfect, untouchable. Mother pressed her lips together, as if holding back words she'd never say aloud. She shifted in her seat, her knuckles white as she clutched the edge of her napkin. The silence returned, louder than before, more painful than shouting, and I sat there frozen, my mind screaming while my mouth stayed shut. I wanted to break it, to say something, anything. To demand why I was always the shadow, always the disappointment. Never enough. But the words stuck in my throat, drowned by the weight of the silence. The dinner table became a battlefield without weapons, only silence sharp enough to wound. And I wondered, how long could I keep sitting there, pretending it didn't cut me open every single night? The silence at the dinner table had stretched too long, taut like a rope ready to snap. Every scrape of a spoon, every clink of glass was magnified like thunder in my ears. I could feel the tension building, invisible yet heavy, pressing against my chest, and then it happened. My father's fist slammed against the table. The plates jumped. The glasses rattled. A spoon rolled off and clattered onto the floor, but no one moved to pick it up. His voice erupted, filling every corner of the room, violent and sharp enough to cut the air in two. "You're selfish," he roared, his face red, his eyes blazing. "Your sister is better than you in every way." The words struck like bullets, each syllable tearing into me. I froze, fork in hand, unable to breathe. My ears rang. My chest tightened. It wasn't the first time he had compared me to Anna, but the raw fury in his voice tonight felt different. It felt final. The fork slipped from my fingers and hit the plate with a sharp metallic clang. My hands trembled against the table's edge, but I forced them to stay still. I couldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break, not yet. Across the table, Anna's head lowered. She stared at her plate, her lashes casting shadows on her cheeks. She didn't lift her eyes. She didn't defend me. She didn't stop him. Her silence was not malicious, but it was deafening all the same. My mother's lips parted as though she might say something, but nothing came. Instead, she busied herself with her napkin, folding it tighter and tighter, as though the fabric could absorb her fear. Her silence was worse than his words. My father's voice thundered again, relentless. "You think the world owes you something. You walk around with your head in the clouds while your sister does everything right. She's responsible, she's respectful, she makes me proud, and you're You're nothing but trouble." Each word pressed me deeper into my chair like a weight I couldn't escape. My throat burned. My eyes blurred, but I forced the tears back, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, to tell him he was wrong, that I wasn't the failure he believed me to be. But my voice felt trapped, crushed under the storm of his anger. The room was filled with his rage, echoing off the walls, leaving no space for anything else. The air felt thick, poisonous, suffocating. My heart pounded so loudly I wondered if they could hear it. And yet, through the humiliation, through the pain, something inside me flickered, a spark. Tiny, fragile, but alive. As my father's words ricocheted in my skull, I realized this wasn't just anger. This was his truth, his belief that I would never measure up. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't need to. For the first time I thought, what if his voice doesn't define me? But as I sat there, silent and trembling, I knew one thing for certain. This explosion was only the beginning. After the storm of his voice, the room fell still again. But this silence wasn't peace. It was heavier, sharper, like shattered glass scattered across the floor, waiting for me to step wrong and bleed. I sat frozen in my chair, my father's words still echoing. "You're selfish. Your sister is better than you." They replayed in my mind like a cruel recording, each repetition carving deeper into my chest. Across from me, Anna didn't look up. She moved her fork in slow, careful motions, her eyes fixed on her plate as though the food in front of her was the most fascinating thing in the world. She didn't ask for his praise, but she lived in it, whether she wanted to or not, and I lived in her shadow. The silence between us grew thick, pressing against my ears until even the faint clatter of her fork sounded deafening. I wanted her to say something, anything. "That's not true. Don't talk to her like that." Even a glance of sympathy would have been enough. But she stayed quiet, locked in her own world. My mother's face was pale, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She shifted in her chair, her knuckles white against the fabric of her napkin. I caught the flicker of her lips parting as though she wanted to speak, but then, nothing. She closed her mouth again. She always did. Her silence cut the deepest of all, because it wasn't just his anger I had to face, it was her refusal to shield me from it. She chose safety and silence, leaving me alone to drown in words that burned like fire. The clock on the wall ticked. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Each second dragged, stretching the silence into eternity. My throat ached with words unsaid. My chest heaved with the effort of holding them back. I wanted to scream, to demand, why am I always compared? Why am I never enough? But I didn't. I sat still, the good daughter, the disappointing one who didn't cause a bigger scene. And in that suffocating silence, something terrifying happened. I began to believe him. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe Anna really was better than me. Maybe I had been lying to myself all this time, trying to prove I had worth. The silence fed those doubts, nurturing them like weeds in a cracked sidewalk. My hands trembled beneath the table, hidden from their view. I clenched them into fists, nails biting into my palms. Pain shot through my skin, grounding me, reminding me that I was still here, still alive. I looked at my father. His face was set, calm now, as if his outburst had been nothing more than a truth spoken aloud. He leaned back in his chair, satisfied. To him, the silence was victory, but to me, it was something else entirely. It was a crucible, a test, a moment where I could either break into pieces or begin to reshape myself into something stronger. And as I sat there in that unbearable stillness, I realized silence could wound me, yes, but it could also sharpen me, because one day I would no longer be silent. The silence at the dinner table was suffocating, but inside me a storm was raging. My father's words still echoed in my head, sharp and unrelenting. "You're selfish. Your sister is better than you." I sat still, my body rigid, but every nerve burned. My chest ached with words I hadn't spoken, truths I had buried for years. My hands trembled beneath the table, nails digging into my palms until the sting of pain grounded me. For so long I had kept myself quiet, hoping that patience would earn me love, hoping that silence would eventually be rewarded. But all it had earned me was invisibility, and now I couldn't take it anymore. I glanced at Anna. Her eyes stayed locked on her plate. But I caught the flicker of discomfort in the way her fork hesitated mid-air. She didn't agree with him, I knew that. But she wasn't going to fight for me either. She never had. And maybe it wasn't her fight, but that made it sting all the same. Then I looked at my mother. She sat at the far end of the table, lips pressed thin, knuckles white around her napkin. She didn't meet my eyes. She never did in moments like this. Her silence was a choice, one that screamed louder than my father's anger ever could. Something inside me cracked. All these years, I had been waiting for her to defend me, waiting for Anna to speak up, waiting for my father to finally see me, to love me without comparing me, but they weren't going to. And the realization was both devastating and liberating. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my heart pounding so violently I thought they might hear it. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like shrinking into myself. I felt like standing taller, like lifting my chin. Even if my voice shook, the breaking point had arrived, not in fire, not in rage, but in clarity. I wasn't going to sit there and absorb his words anymore. I pressed my palms flat against the table, the wood cool beneath my skin steadying me. I drew in a breath so deep it seemed to scrape against my ribs. And then slowly I lifted my eyes to meet his. His stare was sharp, unyielding, expecting submission, but I didn't look away this time. And in that gaze, I found my strength. I wasn't just his disappointment, I wasn't just Anna's shadow. I wasn't just my mother's silence. I was me. The words were forming in my chest, trembling at the edge of my lips, ready to break free. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the explosion it might cause. I wasn't afraid of losing their approval because I realized I never truly had it to begin with. The breaking point wasn't the end of me, it was the beginning of something else entirely. The silence after my father's explosion felt like it could split the air in half. His words still reverberated in the walls, bouncing between us like echoes of a wound. You're selfish. Your sister is better than you in every way. But this time I didn't swallow it. This time, I didn't let it sink into my bones like poison. I drew in a steady breath, and when I exhaled, it wasn't with tears or retreat, it was with fire. I leaned forward, my hands pressing into the table, the wood groaning beneath my palms. My father's glare was still locked on me, daring me to back down, waiting for me to shrink like I always had. But I didn't. Not this time. You think she's better than me? My voice was calm, too calm even to my own ears. It wasn't the voice of a daughter begging for approval. It was the voice of someone who had nothing left to lose. Around the table, forks froze in midair. My cousins shifted uncomfortably, pretending to focus on their plates. My mother's head dropped, her eyes fixed firmly on the napkin in her lap, as though if she didn't look up, she could pretend this wasn't happening. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Good. Then maybe she doesn't need me paying her rent anymore. The words landed like a knife. The entire room stilled. I could feel the weight of their shock pressing against me, but I didn't flinch. My sister's smirk faltered, her lips parting ever so slightly as the color drained from her cheeks. For once, the golden child didn't have a script ready. My father's jaw tightened, his face darkening into a shade of red I'd never seen before. He slammed his palm against the table, the sound cracking through the silence like a gunshot. Glasses rattled. Someone gasped, "Watch your mouth," he barked, pointing at me with trembling fury. "Don't you dare talk like that in my house." But my voice didn't waver. I looked straight at him, the fire inside me steady now, burning bright enough to keep me from collapsing. "Your house?" I said softly, a razor edge in my tone. "Fine, then take care of her yourself. You think she's better? Prove it. You provide for her. You sacrifice for her. Because I'm done being your scapegoat." The air grew heavy, charged, every eye fixed on me. My father stood so abruptly his chair scraped violently against the floor, the sound grating in everyone's ears. His finger jabbed toward the door, sharp and final. "Get out!" His voice thundered, shaking the room. "If you want to be selfish, you don't belong here. Not in this family." "Get out!" The words pierced, but they didn't break me. Not this time. I rose slowly, my chair sliding back with deliberate calm. My heart was pounding so hard it echoed in my ears, but I kept my chin high. I forced a thin smile. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said quietly, and then I walked away. And for the first time in my life, my steps didn't feel heavy. They felt free. The night air hit me like a tidal wave the moment I stepped out the door, cool, sharp, and laced with the scent of damp earth. It felt cleaner than anything I had breathed inside that suffocating dining room. Behind me, voices rose, my father's roar, my sister's sharp whispers, the clatter of plates hurriedly being cleared as though the mess of what had just happened could be swept away like crumbs, but none of it touched me anymore. For the first time in years, their chaos wasn't mine to carry. I walked down the path slowly, every step deliberate. My shoes clicked against the stones, and with each sound, I felt something fall away from me. The guilt, the years of comparison, the endless hunger for validation I would never receive. For once, I wasn't walking away because I was weak. I was walking away because I was strong enough to leave. The night stretched out before me, wide and endless, like a canvas waiting for me to paint on it. I thought of all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wishing my father would look at me the way he looked at her. All the mornings I woke up already tired, drained by the invisible competition I never agreed to play. But tonight I realized something. I didn't lose. I had simply stopped playing their game. The weight of their words no longer chained me. Instead, they became proof. Proof that I had given and given and given until I had nothing left, and still it was never enough. Proof that nothing I did could change the story my father had already written in his head, and proof that I didn't have to live inside that story anymore. I paused at the end of the driveway, turning my head just enough to see the faint glow of the dining room window. Shadows moved inside, frantic, brittle. I knew my absence was already being rewritten. She's ungrateful. She's dramatic. She's selfish, but I also knew the truth. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of their version. My truth was mine. A car passed on the street, headlights washing over me, and for a moment I caught my reflection in the glass of a neighbor's parked car. I looked different, taller somehow, even though I hadn't grown an inch. My shoulders squared, my eyes steady. I didn't see the forgotten daughter anymore. I saw someone who had survived the fire and walked out stronger. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold night air, and whispered to myself, this is the beginning, because it was. The chapter at that dinner table had ended, loud and brutal, but what lay ahead was quiet and full of possibility. No more shrinking to fit their expectations. No more measuring my worth against a sister's shadow. For once, I wasn't running from something. I was walking toward myself. And with each step, the night no longer felt empty. It felt like freedom.